This conference will now be recorded.
Hey.
Good morning, Christy. It's a pleasure to have this conversation with you in preparation for the Spiritist Symposium. And since you are an active participant of this movement, we would like to ask you a couple of questions about yourself and what you think about the movement.
Certainly. It's a pleasure. It's a beautiful morning. Couldn't be a nicer time to have a nice conversation.
So, Christy, please tell us all, where do you live and how you became involved with the Spiritist movement?
Well, I was born and still live in Brooklyn, New York. And I met my wife, Sonia, geez, I guess it's 23 years ago. And on our first date, she said, there are two things that are important to me and that I will not change. And that's my love for my daughter and my commitment to Spiritism.
Wow.
So I said, well, since I like I like Sonia, I guess I'm going to have to learn. Loving her daughter was not too tough, but I said I'm going to have to learn something about Spiritism. And so the next day, our first day was on a Sunday. On Monday, they had an English language meeting at the center that she attended, and I attended the meeting. And I said, something's going on here that I really like. And I've been studying ever since. I've just been going back, and I've been in a number of different centers. And now I'm in IESS. So I've seen a lot of different groups and enjoyed them all. They all have a different tone to them and a different focus. But I've had an excellent experience in all.
Oh, that's an interesting story. And I really like what you said to you, that shows her character from the get-go.
That's right.
So for how long have you been participating in the Spiritist movement?
Well, as I said, we met in 1996, and I've been involved consistently since then.
Wow. So from the get-go,
that was it.
you accept her demands and then you fulfill them.
And I said, that kind of demand I can live with.
I see. What about the Spiritist Symposium? How long have you been participating on the Spiritist Symposium itself?
The first one I was involved with was the 6th symposium in Atlanta, Georgia. And I had been giving some lectures at SGNY, the Shusada Korngold Center, and when I was a participant there. And she invited me to speak at the time about St. Augustine, because I'd been studying about St. Augustine for a couple of years, and I gave a presentation there, and she said this is the kind of topic that would go very well at the symposium. I didn't know anything about the symposium. I'd never heard of it, actually, to be honest with you, up until that point. Because anyway, I hadn't. So she asked me, and I prepared a lecture, and that was my first one.
I see. And it's been a couple of years since we were in Georgia with our friends from Atlanta. So I know you participate in many more of the Spiritist Symposium. So my question to you is, do you have a specific Spiritist Symposium that was more memorable to you? Something that took place or talk that you heard or you gave that it became imprinted in your brain, your memory, that it was a special moment for you?
Well, I think the 9th in Connecticut was probably the one that I remember the most. And I think the reason why, first of all, this was the one about the Spiritist Review, if you remember. I think it was a Laboratory of the Invisible World was the title of the symposium.
Yes.
And the talks on the whole used people's outside strengths to bring a message of Spiritism to the symposium. So, for example, you spoke about poetry, which is something that's close to your heart. I spoke about music. Peter Hayes spoke about painting. And of course, since I'm involved in the arts, I'm a classically trained pianist, this type of thing really appealed to me. And I said, you really getting people to talk about things that they've studied and loved and care about, and bringing something that might not be so obvious, how you make a connection between the arts and a movement like Spiritism. That this was something possible, and it was also a very enlightening event. For that reason, I think people brought their passions with them and spoke about things that really meant some. Not to say that other things can't, but this is something that's central to people's lives that I've studied for years and years, and I'm sure you have, and I'm sure Peter has, and there's other people too. It's not just the study of Spiritism, but it's the ability to bring our entire life and interests to the symposium. It makes it very real, I thought.
You know what? Out of your talks, I believe that one was also very memorable for me. Reason being, it's because I like classical music very much, and Mozart, it really speaks to my entire soul. And the way you explained the music and interaction between the music and the musicians and the instruments, your talk was so thorough, yet very sensitive. And then you concluded with playing the music itself, and that to me, it still gives me goosebumps when I remember that, because for those who were not aware of what you were playing, you were playing a song in which Mozart himself had written after his physical body had expired, also known as death. And yet he came from the beyond to continue to play music. Now, if someone is trained in music, they know it's very hard to mimic a musician like Mozart.
Yes.
So one of the evidence of the mediumship and the afterlife, it's the perfect match of style and the velocity in his music played through a medium, given through a medium. So thank you so much that we had a musician that is also a spiritist of your caliber that can actually transpire Mozart's feelings to us from the great beyond.
Right. And I think that's what I was hoping to get across, that anyone with a passion and an interest in something can connect their passion to the things that we learn weekly and daily from Spiritism.
I see. And with that comment, you actually touched in some of the answer for the next question, because the next question I ask you is, do you have any suggestions on how the symposium is planned, organized, and executed?
Well, I do. Usually I keep my opinions to myself because I figure if someone's not asking me, my opinion is not really all that valuable. But I really have thought a lot about it. And to me, the symposium is a public event. The symposium is a way of opening up not the doctrine of Spiritism, but the spirit of Spiritism, if I could say it that way. The joy that people feel by learning the doctrine, I think, is the important thing to get across, that this is really a very positive, a very growthful and deep message that is apart from the doctrine leads us to this, of course, but we study the doctrine during our weekly meetings at the center. But the symposium is a time to really hear new messages, to hear what people are doing across the country and what they're learning and how it's changing their life. And to me, this is really the heart and soul of the symposium. Not so much having to emphasize necessarily the source of this, because once people feel a joy, they want to know, how did that happen? And it creates an interest that's apart from saying, we have an answer, we know what we're doing, we know, we have it all figured out, and all you have to do is just tap into the things that we tapped into, and you're going to get it too. People want to see this is attractive. this is something that's life-changing. This is something that that I really want. And then, of course, as anything, it's just like, you know, plenty of times people say, oh, I always wanted to play the piano. I love the piano. And I said, well, yeah, it takes a little bit of work to do that. But you start out with the joy. Anyone who is forced to learn to play the piano is not really going to like it necessarily in the end. But if you have an interest, that interest will drive your desire to learn more and more. So the symposium is an open event. That's the way I feel about it, a public open event where we bring our joy and our passion to the things that we know, the things that we've learned, and how it's changed our life.
It's very interesting the way you describe to you what the symposium is. It's a public event. And since the public that we are serving is the American public, you know, it's very hard from the psychological point of view, Edward, to remove the cultural lenses that we have above our eyes, which shapes and interprets everything that we see. For example, if I was born in Italy and if I was raised in Italy, it's very hard for me to understand the American public. If I was born in China, it's very hard for me to understand the American public. Because if I'm trying to serve the American public, but my cultural background and the lenses which I see the world is through the experience I had in China or in Italy, that impacts on how I serve this public, how I tend this public. So based on your experience of what you have seen, what is it that you think that we do that it might have a cultural background influence, which doesn't serve very well the American public, or if it does serve well the American public?
You know, that's a good question and a very difficult one. I have to admit, I know that there are lots of people within the movement who are interested in bridging this gap between cultures and also to appeal to people who may have never heard about, who probably didn't. I mean, just like me, I had never heard about it before I met Sonia, who never heard about it, and to find the find the interest or to create an interest in people. One of the things that I was doing for a while, but it requires a great commitment, is to use Spiritism's focus on truth rather than dogma, and to say we can bridge a lot, so many of the, I was brought up a Catholic, so I read Catholic dogma, and I read Buddhist dogma, and I read Hindu dogma, and I look at these things, and I say, you know, it's not really that different. It's different because the truth is the truth is the truth, as we know, and we can approach it from many different ways. And I was working for a while to try to bridge that gap for myself, to say, you know, where do these meet? And of course, there's certain points at which people are going to say, I believe this and I don't believe that. Okay, we have to respect that because we have that same belief too. But the beliefs are only a part of what happens within the Spiritist movement. It's really, as I said, the heart and soul. It's the joy that learning this brings. And so anyway, what I was thinking of was the idea of bridging the really central issues that Spiritism raises with other religions, because there is so much connection with it. There is, it's not just maybe dogma, or whatever you want to call it, the actual specific beliefs might differ, but where it brings you. I mean, even I did a lot of work between reincarnation and resurrection, and you start to see that at the very bottom of this is giving a meaning to life. At the very bottom of both of these beliefs is a belief that what we do matters, that it has consequences. And whether you want to say there's many lives or just one chance, we all have, it might appeal, either of those beliefs might appeal to you, but what you're getting out of that, the truth is that our lives matter, what we do matters, and we are going somewhere. And what the dogma is, if all you're doing is fighting about or arguing about the dogma, you're missing the basic truth that our life does have a meaning, our life does have a purpose, and what we do does matter.
Thank you for your thoughtful answer, Edward. When you read Allan Kardec, he establishes that if you think that a religion is a collection of rituals, hierarchy of powers, in that sense, Spiritism, it's not a religion. However, when you study the tenets of different religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, what you see in them, it's they all believe in a supreme intelligence of some sort, a supreme being, the immortality of the soul that we continue to go on, and the consequences of our actions. So the third tenet there, the consequences of our actions, it's what we have different interpretations for it.
Right.
And as a result, leads to different ways you live your lives. But in that bottom part right there, existence of God, immortality, and the consequences of our actions, they all describe that. So
Yeah.
in that sense, it connects them all.
Right. And different dogmas will appeal to different people. And this is really where I had the difficulty, because we want to bring this very positive message. But if you don't respond to it, if your heart's not there, even if you are searching for meaning, it has to be in a way that you can, not only make sense to you, but that really is growthful, is a way of growing. And just pushing a dogma on someone and saying these are the beliefs you should have, I don't think causes that transformation. The transformation is from inside, and the transformation is being touched by the message, which definitely I have been touched by the message of Spiritism. But it takes time. And there were plenty of things that I had to say, I don't know if I can accept that. I have to take more time. And here it is over 20 years later. I'm still looking at some of the tenets and saying, I'm not going to say no, but I'm not going to say yes yet. And part of the journey is doing that work yourself. Not just accepting the dogma, not just accepting what we're saying, but to really digest it and to make it part of your life.
That is great, because in that instance, we find in the Spirit's book, Allan Kardec telling us to accept this or accept that. It's always ponder on this and rationalize on that. Think for yourself, and you might arrive at the same conclusion if you take justice as your basis for analysis. So, Edward, my next question to you is this: would you please describe your role or topic for this year's symposium?
Well, this year's symposium is very touching to me. Even the title of the symposium, the awakening of the self. This is, in a way, what we've been talking about here up until this point, that religion and belief and the search for meaning has to do with awakening our deeper inner self. And I was really excited with the topic that I was given. It's just a small topic. Love is the driving force of the universe. I mean, the universe is a small topic. We don't have to. Before you know it, it's done. So it was a good topic to study, and it took me a long time to come to the center of what I really wanted to say. Usually when I prepare for a lecture, I just write down whatever thoughts come to me, and usually I have pages, 20 or 30 pages of notes, and out of that I might take 20 words. and because what I do is try to get all the influences from all these different sources and bring them together into something that that holds, that has a meaning. And at the end, it started becoming clear that everything that we are, everything that we've created from, and everything around us is created from a good God. And this God created the universe out of the love, and that's how we're able to. That's really at the basis of our life. We you know, there's a lot of religions that have this idea that everything material is bad and everything spiritual is good. So there's these two gods that are always conflicting with each other, and so everything that we see in the material world is evil. But that does not touch me, I have to admit. And maybe there's plenty of people who believe that. But once you believe that there's one God, and everything that comes from that God is good, and everything that comes from that God is love, you see that it is the driving force of the universe. You see that everything is pointed towards that, and the evil that exists is really a small, I mean, not to say that it doesn't. There are things in this world that certainly could stand improvement, as we know, including, mainly ourselves. But at the base of it is a goodness. At the base of it is love. And so I had to try to come up with a way of putting that together. And that challenge in itself, usually the topics are given in the fall of the year before the symposium. So I've been working on this theme for 7 months now. As soon as I get it, I started working on it. And with the help that I've got, not only in this world, but in the spirit world as well, the help that I've got, I've hoped that I've managed to say something of importance.
Excellent. We are certain that you will make us all very happy with your talk, my friend. My next question to you is this, Edward. What do you think is the greatest challenge in the U.S. Spiritist movement?
What comes to me is the greatest challenge is an individual challenge, really. It's the challenge for each and every one of us to realize that we're a lot more than just the day-to-day life that we have. And without that desire, without that, I mean, there's so many people working towards trying to make us aware, awakening us to our inner self, as the theme of the symposium is. There's plenty of people doing this kind of work, but there's, until you're touched by that message, until you want to do the work yourself, there's really very little, I think, that people can do. I mean, we can talk, we can continue to do our work, but I think we have to think about working in the right way, which to me means that we continue doing what we know is right without worrying what the result is. So we have to continue to bring the message to people, regardless of whether or not that message is getting through right now. And to really have a belief that what we do does matter, that what we do is the right thing to do. And we have a firm belief in that. And that, I think, again, is just like I spoke about in the beginning, it's a joy that you bring, but it's also the belief that what I'm doing is the right thing. And if people don't come, I've still done the right thing. And if Edward, it takes time for people to come, I've still done the right thing.
I appreciate your words. for those who are involved in this movement and so wholeheartedly they try everything they can in order to disseminate this message. I'm sure they have been consoled by your words, my friend. Thank you so much for your sincerity in what you said. It's very important for us to believe that what we're doing is the right thing to do. Excellent. Listen, this is sort of a challenged question. Uh, it says, if you had any financial resources, if you had a lot of money, time, power, how would you use to disseminate Spiritism in the US?
I thought about this, and again, the first thing that came to me was if I had infinite. Well, maybe I should start where I first got this idea. Sonia and I took a trip to Europe back around Thanksgiving time, and we stopped in a Spiritist center in Vienna, Austria, run by Brazilians. So the meeting was in Portuguese. But I was thinking, here I am in Vienna, Austria, in a Spiritist center. This work is going on around the world. There are centers that all over the US, all over the world, doing work. And it was so heartening to see. And I started thinking there's a David Cohen's coming from Montana. I didn't know there was a Spiritist center in Montana. And having gone to a number of different Spiritist centers throughout the 20 some odd years that I've been involved with this, it becomes very clear that every center is guided by a different kind of message. Or maybe not, a different message is the wrong way of saying it. They're guided by a different heart in a kind of way. They're taking the message and they're making it their own. The community itself, the Spiritist community in each one of the centers has its own tone, its own reason to be. They're not all the same. And so what I thought about when I was in Vienna, sitting there, I said, wouldn't it be beautiful for us to see the work that is being done across the world and appreciating that each center is doing the work that its members need, that the community is calling for this kind of work, and they're building a sense of community. They're building the kind of center that each person there needs. And opening up people to this work across the nation, across the world, is a way of opening up our own idea of what our center can be and what our center can do, the work that's being done there as well. So if I had infinite resources, I would just create a bunch of caravans and we'd go around the world in various centers and spend the week there, see what they do, see what they're talking about, see the work that they're doing, see how people are being transformed by the work that's being done in the center and the work that's being done individually.
I like your answer. Reason being, it's because for one to have different perceptions of the same thing, one must see through the eyes of other people. And when you said that they have their own way of doing things, I believe it's because they take into consideration the context in which they find themselves in. Because the message, the text must have a different interpretation when it's found in a different context. Right. And in the context we find ourselves in, which is the United States, one have to be very sensitive in how we send the text, the message within the context.
Exactly.
Very, very good, Edward. And finally, my question too is, how do you see the Spiritist movement 5 years from now?
This is a management style type question, isn't it? Kind of like an interview question. But when you ask me that question, I think about where am I going to be in 5 years? not where the movement's going to be, because the movement isn't imposed from the outside. The movement comes from inside. It comes from the inner work that each one of us do. So what I see in 5 years is my own hope for my continued growth in understanding, in changing my life, and becoming more of a human being, more loving, more compassionate. With each year that passes and the study that I do, and then hearing the work that other people do, it's leading me in that direction. So I think that's where Spiritism will be in 5 years. It'll be wherever the individual members take it. And that's our responsibility. That's each one of us, the job that we have to do.
I really like your answer because it's so hard to predict the future. Very hard. There are so many challenges in saying what's going to happen 3 months from now, let alone 5 years.
Right.
However, you are saying that you are certain that you will be a better individual. That you can be certain of, and that's because you are in control of yourself.
That's right.
You have power over your destiny, and if you are aware of what your potential is, you always will work towards betterment. And
you said it better than
I did. I'm interpreting your words because you said, I'm for certain there'll be a more compassionate individual, a more loving individual. You know, I will serve more. That's what we're certain of, you know. And most of the questions I presented, there is no right answer. I just want to hear people's interpretation of what they think about the same material that is so dear to us, the Spiritist movement. So Edward, thank you so much for your presence, and there will be so many people listening to your view of our movement, and we definitely appreciate your time here with us. And the final words are with you.
Come to the symposium. This is an event that not only a lot of people have put work into, but have put their life's work into. And it's a day where we could just be surrounded by positive messages, things that will help us to grow, things that will help us to think about the things that really matter, things that will help us to change our life. This is I think the real intent of the symposium. It's to, as I said, to get people from all over the U.S. to show the work that they're doing, that show the work, the personal work they're doing, show the work that's being done within the centers. And it's an opportunity, almost like my little caravan around the world. The caravan is coming to you. So you don't even have to pack your bags. Just take a shower and come. Uh-oh. I lost the audio, sorry.
Okay. For those of you who are not aware, the Spiritist Symposium would take place on May 4th at King University in New Jersey. And like Edward said, you know, speakers from all over the U.S. will combine their, you know, academic background, the intellectual efforts, and most importantly, the knowledge they have of the Spiritist philosophy to merge science and spirituality in order to make a very rational, concise explanation of what our lives are all about. And most important, they will give you real tools to apply in your daily lives in order to improve your lives, or at least to cope with the problems that we all have. Thank you, Edward, for your time.
Thank you, Julia. It was a pleasure talking to you.
The pleasure was all mine.